Have you ever tried to explain to someone why you need so much time alone? Have you ever received that pitying look when they say, "You should go out more"? Have you ever felt like an alien trying to understand why people enjoy small talk in the elevator? If you answered yes, then you know the cruelest kind of loneliness. Being surrounded by people who don't understand you. There's a German word for this. Entfremdung. It means feeling like a stranger in your own world. It's when you're physically present, but it feels like you don't belong. Like everyone else got a manual on how to be human, and you were the only one left out. This feeling isn't new. Albert Camus wrote about a character named Meursault in his book The Stranger. This man didn't cry at his own mother's funeral. People were scandalized. How can someone be so cold? They asked. But maybe Meursault just felt things differently. Maybe he wasn't cold, just different. And let's talk about something no one told you. Our society was built for a certain kind of person. The kind who gains energy from being around others. Open-plan offices where everyone works side by side. Stand-up meetings to energize the conversation. Mandatory happy hours. Job interviews where you have to sell yourself in 30 seconds. Even going to the doctor means sitting in a waiting room full of strangers and then discussing personal things with someone you don't know. For some people, that's energizing. For you, it's like trying to run a marathon after donating blood. And when you show signs of exhaustion, when you say you need time alone, people look at you like there's something wrong. You're too shy, they say. You need to loosen up. As if preferring quiet were a disease in need of a cure. But here's the truth no one tells you. There's nothing wrong with you. Do these situations sound familiar? You prefer texting over phone calls. After a party, you need hours alone to recharge. You have a few close friends, but no large circle. Small talk drains you. You need time to think before answering questions. Crowds make you anxious or overwhelmed. You prefer quiet activities like reading or drawing. If you identify with most of this, you're part of a group of people who function differently. And that's not a flaw. It's a personality type. Science has already proven this. A researcher named Hans Eysenck discovered that some people have brains that are more sensitive to stimuli. They process information more deeply. That's why you feel overwhelmed in noisy places. Your brain is working overtime to process everything. Some people need more stimulation to feel good. That's why they enjoy parties and group conversations. You need less. That's why you feel better in calm environments. It's not laziness. It's not shyness. It's just how your brain works. But let's be honest about one thing. Being different hurts. It hurts when your family says you're antisocial because you don't want to go to the Sunday barbecue. It hurts when coworkers make comments about you being weird because you eat lunch alone. It hurts when you try to explain that you need to cancel plans because you're mentally drained and people roll their eyes. The worst part is when you start to believe there's something wrong with you. When you push yourself to be more sociable, more spontaneous, more normal. It's like trying to write with your left hand when you're right-handed. You can do it, but it's uncomfortable, and the result is never great. And there's another thing that really stings. The loneliness in the middle of a crowd. You know that feeling of being at a party, surrounded by people, yet feeling completely alone? It's because you're trying to connect on a deeper level, but everyone else just wants to talk about superficial things. You want to discuss dreams, fears, philosophy, art. They want to talk about the weather or a reality TV show. That makes you wonder if you're too demanding, if you're too complicated, if maybe you should just accept shallow connections instead of searching for something that might not even exist. But the truth is, there are people like you, people who value depth, people who would rather have a real 30-minute conversation than 3 hours of small talk. The problem is these people are rare, and it takes longer to find them. In the meantime, you learn how to navigate this loud, superficial world. You develop strategies, headphones on public transport, bathroom breaks during social events just to breathe, polite lies about why you can't make it to the happy hour. Oh, I have other plans. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said that we are only truly ourselves when we are alone. And for you, that makes perfect sense. It's when you're alone that you can think clearly. It's when you feel like you can breathe. It's when you connect with who you really are, without having to play a role to please others. But here's the problem. Even though you know you need that alone time, you carry guilt. Society taught you that being alone is bad, that solitude means sadness or failure, that successful people are always outgoing and surrounded by friends. That's a lie. Some of the most creative and intelligent people in history preferred solitude. Einstein liked to work alone. Van Gogh found inspiration in solitude. Bill Gates used to lock himself away to think about big projects. You're in good company. Alone time isn't an escape from reality. For you, it's where reality happens. It's where you process what you've experienced during the day. It's where you have your best ideas. It's where you recharge your emotional energy. The problem comes when this alone time is misunderstood by others. When your family thinks you're depressed. When friends stop inviting you because you've declined too many times. When coworkers whisper that you're strange because you don't join in the lunchroom chat. And then you feel torn. Part of you wants to explain, wants to make people understand that you're not being rude or disinterested. You just operate differently. Another part of you is tired of always having to explain. Why should you have to justify your personality as if it were a flaw? Sometimes that builds a quiet anger, a frustration with the constant pressure to be someone you're not. You look at people chatting endlessly about topics you find shallow and think, how do they have so much energy for this? You see people who seem to have infinite social batteries and wonder if there's something wrong with yours. That frustration is normal. But it's important not to let it turn into bitterness. Because when it does, you might start to see everyone as shallow or annoying. You might start to believe you're superior because you prefer depth. And then, isolation stops being a healthy choice and becomes an escape. The difference is subtle but important. Choosing to be alone because it's good for you is one thing. Being alone because you hate people is a completely different story. Healthy solitude energizes you. You use that time to grow, to create, to reflect. You can still connect with others when needed, even if you prefer not to do it every day. Toxic isolation makes you bitter. You use that time to dwell on grudges, to feed anger, to convince yourself the world is a terrible place full of terrible people. And it's easy to slip from one to the other without even realizing it. When you spend too much time alone feeding negative thoughts about others, your mind starts building distorted narratives. Every social interaction becomes proof that people are fake. Every declined invitation reinforces the belief that you're right to pull away. Every misunderstanding becomes evidence that no one really gets you. Psychologists call this a confirmation bias. It's when your brain only looks for information that supports what you already believe. If you believe people are shallow, you'll only notice the moments when they act superficially. You'll ignore the moments of depth and genuine connection. Over time, this can lead you to dangerous places. There are online communities full of bitter people who have isolated themselves and now spend their time feeding each other's anger and resentment. They convince themselves they're superior, that they're the only ones who see the truth about the world. That's how extremist groups get started. People who felt rejected by society gather to validate each other's pain. But instead of seeking healing or growth, they feed the anger until it turns into hatred. What began as real pain turns into a toxic ideology. The same thing happens with fanatics of all kinds, extremists who feel out of place in modern society, conspiracy theorists who believe they alone know the real truth. In all these cases, the pattern is the same. People who felt misunderstood or rejected find groups that validate their anger, but instead of helping, those groups only intensify the negativity. Studies show that when people with similar ideas group together without exposure to different perspectives, their views become more extreme. This is called group polarization. If you think the world is 30% bad and you join people who think the same, soon you'll all believe the world is 70% bad. That's why it's important to be careful about which communities you turn to when you're feeling misunderstood. Seek out groups that validate your pain, but also encourage you to grow. Avoid groups that only feed anger and resentment. The truth is, you need balance. You need your alone time, but you also need some contact with people who are different from you. Not to become someone else, but to keep your perspective healthy. Think of it like mental exercise. If you only lift weights, some muscles get overdeveloped while others weaken. If you only socialize, you might lose the ability to introspect. If you only stay alone, you might lose the ability to empathize and connect. The ideal is to find your rhythm. Maybe it's 80% alone time and 20% with others. Maybe it's one deep conversation a week instead of 5 shallow ones a day. Maybe it's about carefully choosing who you spend your limited social energy on. And it's important to remember that not all people are shallow or dismissive. There are others out there, fighting the same battles as you. There are empathetic people who genuinely want to understand how you operate. There are people in the middle ground who can adapt to your communication style. The trick is learning to spot these people and invest in them, instead of wasting energy trying to fit into groups that aren't meant for you. Another important thing, you don't have to explain your personality to everyone. You don't owe anyone that. If someone criticizes you for being too quiet or antisocial, that's their problem, not yours. You're not obligated to justify yourself. At the same time, it's good to have a few people in your life who truly get you. People you can be fully authentic with. It could be a friend, a family member, a therapist, or even an online group. The important thing is to have at least one genuine connection to balance out the superficial relationships you're forced to maintain. And remember, preferring solitude in a world that values constant socializing is like being left-handed in a right-handed world. It's harder, you have to adapt more, but it's not a flaw. It's just a different way of being. Your traits aren't bugs, they're features. Your sensitivity allows you to notice nuances others miss. Your preference for depth leads to more meaningful connections. Your need for solitude gives you space for creativity and personal growth. Your tendency to think before you speak allows for more careful, precise communication. But here's the dark side no one talks about. This distance can turn into an invisible prison. It can start as a healthy choice and become something that limits you. It can become an escape from life instead of a way to live better. The danger isn't in being alone. The danger is being alone for the wrong reasons. When you pull away not to recharge, but to hide. When you avoid people not because you need space, but because you're afraid of getting hurt. When solitude stops being a refuge and turns into a fortress, that's when isolation becomes dangerous. When you start feeding toxic thoughts about others. When every negative experience becomes proof that the world is bad. When you stop trying to connect because, why bother if it always goes wrong? You might even start romanticizing your solitude as if it were a moral virtue. I'm better than these shallow people. I see the truth they can't see. I'm deeper, smarter, more aware. That sense of superiority can be seductive, but it's a trap. Because underneath that supposed superiority is fear. Fear of getting hurt again. Fear of being rejected. Fear of finding out you're not as special as you think. Fear that maybe the problem isn't just with others, it's also with you. And that's where the dark side of isolation hides. When it stops being self-preservation and becomes self-sabotage. When you convince yourself you're better off alone, not because you feel good that way, but because you're afraid of what might happen if you try to connect. Solitude can become addictive. It can feel safer than the risk of being disappointed by people. It can feel easier than the work of building relationships. It can seem nobler than admitting you also need human connection. But the truth is, we all need some level of connection. It doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be constant. But it has to exist, because when you isolate completely, you lose perspective. You can start believing in distorted versions of reality. Without the mirror of others, you can get lost in your own thoughts. You can start to believe your perceptions are always right. You can develop extreme ideas about the world. You can lose the ability to see nuance, to recognize that most people are neither entirely good nor entirely bad. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Hell is other people." But he also said we need the gaze of others to truly know ourselves. It's a paradox. People can be a source of suffering, but they're also necessary for our growth. That's why it's important to recognize when your withdrawal is becoming harmful. When you notice you're feeding anger or resentment. When you realize you're generalizing about all people based on a few bad experiences. When you feel like you're losing the ability to connect, even when you want to. These are signs that you need to seek some kind of reconnection. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can happen slowly. It can start with one person at a time. It can begin online and move to in-person later. The important thing is not to let your isolation turn into a black hole that pulls you in deeper and deeper. The world needs people like you. People who question instead of blindly accepting. People who value quality over quantity. People who see beyond the surface. But the world also needs you to stay connected to it. On your own terms. In your own way. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. But you do need to be mindful not to let your uniqueness become a prison. You need to find ways to honor your need for solitude without completely isolating yourself from life. It's a fine line, but it's possible to walk it. It's possible to be selective without being isolated. It's possible to prefer depth without despising the surface. It's possible to value solitude without fearing companionship. And if you've made it this far, it's because something in you recognizes these words, because you see yourself in this experience of navigating the tension between the need to be alone and the danger of being too alone. Know that you are not alone in this journey. There are millions of people like you, trying to find that balance, trying to honor their nature without getting lost in it. If you feel like you need a map to guide you through these inner landscapes, know that my ebook Alchemy and Archetypes was created for exactly that purpose. To help you turn the lead of pain into the gold of awareness, with practical exercises that connect theory and experience. And if this reflection spoke to you, if it stirred something deep inside, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear these words.